I'm gonna grab some water. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right, it's 2 o'clock, so if you want to go ahead and kick it off, and then we'll dive into introductions, and we will take it from there.
Just 1 sec. Are we live yet?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, very good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on what is our last official National Entrepreneurship Week event and panel, The Future of Entrepreneurship. And before I hand it over to Amber, I just want to thank everybody who's been participating and all of the great panelists in events and webinars from all of our partners, from NACE and EntreEd, every library, our Kapp, and Amber, am I missing? I'm sure I'm missing a couple of folks who've helped us along the way and along the years. We're certainly appreciative of all the work and everything that has been done. And super excited about this panel. So thank you very much to our panelists today, and thank you, Amber, for hosting it. It looks like this has been just a phenomenal year, and we're very, very excited to not only bring it to a close, but also begin the planning process for 2022. So with that, Amber, it's all over to you. Oh, I guess I should probably introduce myself.
Yeah, you might.
My name is Joe Kapp, and I'm the founder of the National Center for Resource Development. I'm also the co-chair with Amber, and I've been working in and around entrepreneurship pretty much all my life. I started my first business and sold it in high school, and I have been a serial entrepreneur and working in a variety of capacities. Amber and I restarted National Entrepreneurship Week about 5 years ago, and are super excited to be able to continue the tradition of helping people learn more about becoming entrepreneurs and helping existing businesses and business owners expand their businesses. With that, Amber, over to you.
Awesome, thank you. So hi everyone, as Joe mentioned, I helped co-chair with Joe in 2017, the relaunch of National Entrepreneurship Week. I am an educator at heart. I work for a company called the Adventure Group as their manager of innovation, and we are broadly interested in just really spurring innovation and change within the K-12 education realm. And so we are just thrilled to kind of have an entrepreneur and an educator represented on that co-chairing movement of the relaunch. And we're excited about this panel today to kind of wrap up National Entrepreneurship Week 2021. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and we're going to have just a really cool conversation with some awesome rock stars in the space of innovation. And so I'm going to ask them to just introduce themselves, and then we can dive into some of the questions. So Dr. Rhoda Deon, would you mind introducing yourself and your organization?
Sure. I am Dr. Rhoda Deon. I am the EdTech evangelist at Firia Labs. Firia Labs is an Alabama-based company that creates robotics, physical computing experiences, as well as curriculum for middle and high school students. Our goal as a company is to create products and experiences that allow students to spark their creativity and their innovative capacity around computer science.
Fantastic. So we have kind of education represented. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going by my screen. So we're going to go to Mark Madrid from the SBA.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Madrid. I'm representing the Small Business Administration and the Office of Entrepreneurial Development. And first and foremost, thank you for joining us on taking precious time on a Friday in a virtual world. Whatever you're dealing with today, we're excited that you joined us. I'm energized to be here. A special shout out to the 29 other members of this team of the Office of Entrepreneurial Development. And we really, what our job is to do is to serve small business owners through our technical assistance resource mapping across the United States. So we're excited to be here on behalf of the 30 of us and have this conversation. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. We're thrilled to have you here representing the Small Business Administration. And then I have Carlos Gutierrez with LGBT Tech. Oh, Carlos, you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Joe. I am Carlos Gutierrez, Deputy Director and General Counsel for the LGBT Technology Partnership and Institute. We are a nonprofit organization that works with technology and the intersection between technology and the LGBT causes. We also run a nonprofit program called Power On that provides technology to underserved populations like the LGBT population, so to encourage entrepreneurial and other kind of activities. So very happy to be here and join this conversation.
Great, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Nguyen from Republic. So would you mind giving a little bit of background and introduction on your work?
Hi, everyone. Nguyen, CEO of Republic, republic.co.co. We are the leading investment platform for people who want to make a difference with the dollar by investing in startups, in small businesses, in real estate. Our mission is in ensuring that retail, public, can use the capital that they have and support small businesses across all different verticals. And we very much believe that that will equalize the playing field for entrepreneurs. In 4 years, our data certainly suggests as such, and I'm just incredibly excited and honored to be a part of the conversation today. Thank you very much, Amber and Joe, for having us, and thank you to the audience for tuning in.
Great, thank you. So I think, this is a conversation about the future, but we would be remiss if we didn't start it off by acknowledging that the future looks a little differently due to the events of the past year. And so I'm going to ask each of you to kind of weigh in on acknowledging everything that has happened. And this has been a challenging time for entrepreneurs and small businesses. What does the future look like in your opinion? And Dr. Deon, I'm going to start with you, as education itself has definitely been disrupted too. So I'd love your perspective, and then we'll dive into the other panelists. You're on mute.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. So what does the future look like, kind of acknowledging the challenges that we're currently facing, especially in the education side of things?
So I think in the education side of things, the most certain thing about the future is uncertainty right now. And that we have been faced with coming to terms with the lack of flexibility in our current educational model. For the last 20 years, education has been talking about how we need to shift to support a knowledge-based economy, to support a future for our children that is going to be different than the one we see right now. Like, we don't know the jobs that our students will have. And I think we are coming more to terms with what it means for us to be agile enough to prepare our children for tomorrow.
Fantastic. And I think that lends itself well to kind of the other panelists' perspectives on being in the current entrepreneurial space and looking at startups and kind of, so Mark, I'm interested to hear your perspective on what's the future look like.
Oh my goodness. Entrepreneurs, if you're out there, small business owners, whether you're hearing this right now, or you have aspirations to become a small business owner, or you hear this recording, it's a tough time. It's a tough time for our entrepreneurs. What I will tell you is that they're resilient as ever. They were during the 9/11 comeback, rising up after the Great Recession, and they are today as a result of COVID and social injustice. And so with that said, it's still a very tough time. Whereas small businesses at some point, I know so many of them who are thinking about growth and scale. Now they're thinking about restoration. And considered in the context that small businesses drive job creation, they drive households. And so it connects the dots to all sorts of reality when it comes to who we know, our neighbors, the people within our households, our grandparents, our uncles, our nieces. Everyone is connected to small business owners. And I can tell you, as someone who lost his dad to COVID-19 and almost lost my mom, and my sister was positive back in the summer of 2020, I go on the field of my father, who opened his own welding business that he had for 40 years. And I think about him, how it was the intersection of being a small business owner, looking to at some point franchise the operation. And then COVID, the collision hit, and we lost our father. So I know that I don't walk alone. And I know there's many stories here that you could share with us, those who are watching, but it's time for us to listen to the small business owners that are segmented, that are of different colors and different positions, different sizes, so that they can not only restore themselves, but that they can actually access and have a direct path to resources. And that's a disconnection that's happening right now. So whether that means PPP, which has become a daily word in our vocabulary, the Paycheck Protection Program, or some other resource, it's time to think of that as a national, regional, state, county, municipal level, and also count in on public-private partnerships also in order to fill this gap right now that is affecting us and is critical.
Thank you. And yeah, the impacts of COVID-19 are profound and they cannot be understated. And so we appreciate you being here to speak to that today. And speaking of listening to the diverse voices of entrepreneurship, Carlos, I'm interested in your perspective of what the future of entrepreneurship looks like with your work at LGBT Tech.
Sure. I think one of the things that struck me as I prepared for this conversation is, and it is, I'm sure there's some other term for this, but it's almost this idea of forced entrepreneurship that COVID brought about. People, and also just the idea that people don't know that they're entrepreneurs when they're doing these kind of things. So for example, in the middle of COVID, there was these people who used to be physical trainers at gyms who now took this online and started charging people $5 for a class to be online. Or there were these artists who used to be in musicals that are now doing like birthday songs for people on Zoom, that are starting their own businesses this way. It's not someone, I don't know that there's necessarily someone that would think of themselves as entrepreneurs per se and plug into that market, but that is what they are. So COVID has now forced a lot of people to kind of rethink their life in a very kind of outside the box kind of way, start their own businesses because they don't have the option to do anything else. So there is this, to me, this sense that there is this opportunity out there for, in the future of entrepreneurship, to kind of reach out to these kind of people and really kind of tell them you're entrepreneurs and there are tools there for you. And if you want to develop this into a viable business, this is what you're doing. For minority communities as well, I mean, I think that there's no question that minority communities and the LGBT community as well have been struck particularly hard by the COVID crisis. And the ability to start a business has always been important to the LGBT community because until last summer, it was legal to fire somebody for being LGBTQ+ in over 25 states in this country. Until the Supreme Court decision last summer took that away, we could all be fired. So we, as a community, we feel vulnerable. And minority communities have always been vulnerable to employment lack. So entrepreneurship and the ability to start your own business and take your own future into your own hands, it is much more important than ever now with COVID, but it's always been a concern specifically for minority and underprivileged communities.
Great, thank you. And when we talk about just the accessibility of entrepreneurship, there's nobody I think of other than Ken in the work that you're doing at Republic. And so I'd love to see, from your opinion, what the future looks like in your work related in this space.
Thank you, Amber. Looking at the future, I approach it with what I would call deliberate optimism. Deliberate in the sense of recognizing that during a pandemic, or any social hardship, it widens the inequality gap. It's very clear that both socially, from access to medicine all the way to access to capital for small businesses, underserved demographics become more underserved. Optimistic because I think the power of retail investor, of everyday folks, is so obvious and recently magnified through the whole Reddit and GameStop saga. The good and the bad of that, you can see that the power of everyday folks can be massive and can really even take that Wall Street, so to speak. So the notion of how do we get the message out there and deliberately, intentionally drive people's attention to supporting entrepreneurship, supporting businesses and founders and products that they believe in, that they want to see in their community. I have no doubt that we're going to be able to do that collectively as a society. And that's where public and private partnership becomes so crucial, I think, over the next few years and the decade to come.
Fantastic. And I think that lends itself well to our next question, which I'm going to ask Mark to take on first and then have kind of the folks that are on the ground to answer this one. But kind of what role does the government play in support of small business and startups? And has that changed at all, Mark?
Well, I think it's evolving. We're excited under the Biden-Harris administration to have America's resource plan that includes being nimble for small business owners. You're going to see a community navigator framework that will be revealed. And we're very excited about that because the government does have a role in connecting entrepreneurs that are under-resourced, under-networked, under-capitalized, and do something about it through actions and not just words. And so I'm fortunate to have Jack Bianco here, who's in here helping us. Thank you, Jack. He's in the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, so he can certainly understand, along with our 29 members, that we're doing everything that we can for the government to play a role and to be visible. But it starts with making sure that we listen to the entrepreneurs and meet them where they are. I'm glad you mentioned the ground, Amber, because my whole existence in nonprofit executive management prior to this post at the SBA was about fighting a ground war, not an air war. And what I mean by that, if you're fighting an air war, that means that you're so far above and disconnected to the small business owner, to who you serve. And that's a big problem. We've been waging I can tell you here, and it's my first week, I'll be honest with you, but it is 16-hour days and well worth it to serve the community. You don't want to see a picture of this virtual office right now. I'm glad I have this beautiful backdrop of the SBA, but we are working hard to make sure that we listen and that we act. And so I'm excited that what we will be rolling out as an agency, not only the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, but all the departments of the SBA to continue to serve the customer. Our customer, make no mistake about it, will be very crystal clear, is a small business owner across the US and Puerto Rico. What we're gonna have to work on is continue to assess where we are. What I mean by that is when we take it, I'll give an example. The most elementary, rudimentary source of capital, disaster recovery resources. So whether we're talking the PPP program or the EIDL loan, and if you don't know what the EIDL loan is, I'm sure Jack is going to help us with a link. Jack, I owe you. So anyhow, when we take a look at that, there's a lot of dimensions. When we're talking the PPP, there's the first draw in 2020. Then there's the second draw that came in during the emergency Corona bill, scenario that passed. And then there's the what's next part, right? Under our administration now, under President Biden and Vice President Harris, and through the SBA. But there's also components that you can't forget about with the first draw. You have forgiveness of the first draw, converting that funding into a grant. Then you'll have the forgiveness of the second draw and compliance factors. And then you're looking ahead to what's next. So our job is to make sure that beyond sending somebody to a website is providing actual direction. What changed between that memo and this memo? That's just one example. And also installing this navigation concept, which means let's leverage community supporters to help us draw and support through the technical resource and assistance map that I outlined, whether it's the small business development centers, the women's business centers, and leveraging the SCORE chapters. So we are committed, we're ready, we're energized, I can tell you that, and we're ready to act.
Yeah, your energy is palpable. I'm really like feeling it through the screen. It's great. And I'm just really appreciative. And I think that the whole facilitation of National Entrepreneurship Week and these conversations is to provide an opportunity for folks to interact with the federal agencies and to really give an opportunity and a forum for that listening. And so I'm interested in each of the other panelists weighing in there on like, what do you view is the role of the federal government, particularly within your kind of different areas and stakeholders that you work with? What would be the role for the federal government in your opinion? And Carlos, I'll start with you on this one.
So I think that there are a lot of programs that are not specifically entrepreneurship related that are very important to entrepreneurs, and I think it's important to keep an eye on that. So for example, one of the big problems that I think we have in this country is the digital divide and the access to technology by different people. And when you talk about smaller entrepreneurs, and we're all dealing with the Zoom craziness right now, and kind of 20 devices, children are at home on their remote learning, the parents are trying to have meetings. When you talk about entrepreneurs and starting a business right now, and this ties into the conversation about the future of entrepreneurship, online and technology-driven businesses are kind of where we're going right now, out of necessity. So technology plays a big part. So there are programs like the FCC's emergency broadband benefit that's being launched. There's a $3.2 billion program that will give a $50 voucher to eligible households for internet service, as well as $100 for a device. Again, so this is for specific categories of people who have been hit hard by COVID, but a lot of entrepreneurs, as we discussed, will be coming into a new rollout of this. So government programs that give people the tools to launch businesses don't have to be entrepreneurship related exactly. Programs that allow people to engage with technology in a way that gives them enough speed and enough internet access at home to be able to run a business from home are as important. So, those kind of programs, as well as private and public partnerships that reach out to this, are going to be crucial. One of the aspects that don't get talked about a lot with entrepreneurs and other communities is digital literacy. So a lot of people have access to technology, they don't know how to use it, they don't know what it's capable of. So digital literacy programs for entrepreneurs are important so that entrepreneurs can see like how they can scale their businesses into an online environment that they may not have thought of. So the government's role in this is really important in terms of supporting A, technology, and B, kind of providing resources for people to be able to take these tools and do something with them in their own homes.
Sure. Thank you. And the digital divide, Rhoda, I'm going to throw it over to you because I know that's also impacted education significantly. And when we talk about aspiring in the next generation of entrepreneurs, I'd love to hear you weigh in on the federal government's role in that space.
Thank you, Amber. I'm so glad you asked. I'm assuming you could see my hand like furiously jotting notes over here. I was just like, yes, Carlos, yes. The digital divide is so important, and just infrastructure digitally within communities is so important. And as there's a quote who I cannot tell you the name of who says it, but it says, man has no shortage of resources, only a shortage of ideas. And entrepreneurial mindset is all about seeing problems as opportunities. And we have to create that in a child and in an educational setting. And the ways that we spark imagination, creativity, and entrepreneurial mindset is by exposing children to lots of different images and possibilities. And technology is one of the easiest ways to do that. When you have good broadband, we can take you all over the world. There is so much more that we can expose you to in a way that we could not have done even 10 years ago, much less 100 years ago. And so the need to support the infrastructure so that education can be delivered is very important. It's also important for schools to have the funding that allow teachers to give to their students what they need to give them. So not just an infrastructure, but then being able to go out and get the tools and resources, as well as the time off that teachers need to recover, because social and emotional learning is not just for our children. It's for the people who take care of them as well. And that mental wellness and health and well-being needs to be prioritized just like the digital infrastructure does.
Incredibly, incredibly powerful. And in knowing that you're in like the STEM education coding space, there is tons of growth on that at the federal level to push for STEM initiatives. And I would be a big advocate for entrepreneurship standing by that side by side, because innovation can't happen in a bubble. As priorities in STEM go, we also need to support the entrepreneurial spirit around STEM innovation. So thank you for that perspective. And Ken, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the federal government and how they can support during this time.
Thank you, Amber. And I agree completely that when it comes to getting the message out, bringing and driving that awareness to the general public, the government is probably the most effective and powerful agent to get that out there. But we, being in the private investing space, is a highly regulated space. In fact, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, it was illegal if you're not a millionaire to invest privately. So all of these things are new, and it was under the President Obama that we see this change in regulatory framework that enable everyone to invest a small amount in small businesses that they want to support. And we saw that being embraced and expand that over the years. But it's still, 2 seconds into this whole new day. In fact, in March, the Kapp, currently a small business, and small business loosely defined, no one can raise more than $1 million from the retail public. Well, that's a lot of money. But if you are a owner of a chain of restaurants in 5 different states, that $1 million may not be enough. And so in March, the cap is going to be raised to 5 million. And I think that that's a big step along the way of making retail investing, I think, a mainstream trend. And I just want to share a statistic. Every single year, Americans spend more than $100 billion in Vegas, spend another $80 billion in buying lottery tickets. If 10% of that, 1% of that goes to small businesses of all different verticals. Imagine the difference and the contribution it would be to our society and our economy overall. So getting that message out, I think has and will rely on both the private sector and the work of the federal and state governments to see its full potential.
Yeah, Mark, please weigh in.
Well, I've been taking notes. Thank you, Carlos, Ken, and Rhoda. Wonderful suggestions. I'm so excited. I'm about to crawl out of my skin here because the community navigator is going to help us with some of that, which will be seeing rolled out agency-wide. And really the OED, the Office of Entrepreneurial Development, we're taking a look at that and how we connect through community champions and get the word out. Thank you for your digital divide comments, comments on broadband. Ken, your mention of innovation and shattering limits, right? So I also want to pledge our support of segmentation. A small business owner population is not a catch-all. There's a difference between a solo entrepreneur and an entrepreneur that is certified and securing and procuring contracts from the government. So we need to be mindful of that and leverage our agency departments appropriately in terms of these awareness campaigns and access opportunities. And there's moments when we could do a better job, and we will under this administration, of working together. I'm so energized by my fellow associate administrators running their departments along with their teams and us coming together. And we are so hopeful about our new administrator as well, working with the central messaging coming down from the American Rescue Plan. So your notes are well received, and I'm going to do something with them. Thank you.
Amber, can I just add one thing, because there's also a very important role that not just at the federal, when we talk about government, it's also the interplay between the federal government and the state and local governments and the roles that they play. I think Jack just posted some stuff with regards to state-by-state basis, and the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers that are located on various campuses. Oftentimes they're collaborating with the departments of commerce within the state and the local economic development agencies. So I just want to be mindful of the fact that this is not just, let's look at the federal government as one piece of this. In fact, there's a whole ecosystem that we've been really intentional about building with regards to the National Entrepreneurship Week that plays a role in here, and that the opportunities to be able to get free counseling and coaching, can really stem across the board from a government perspective. So I just wanted to add that because it's really important. And I know, Mark, your role is to really help serve as a facilitator among that continuum from local, small, and state, federal business governments as well.
That's a great point. And I'll just chime in for 10 seconds. Please look at your resources all in. And those could be from a municipal level, county level, state level, or regional level. They could be from a corporate provider level. And one business comes to mind. When the pandemic broke, Maria from Progeny Coffee said, Mark, we lost our 90% of our revenue in one day. But she started pulling her resources together. And fast forward, about 2.5 months later, she was featured on Good Morning America, because all she did was pivot from a B to B profile to a B to C, business to consumer profile, leveraging another small business owner that could help her with the technology, another woman-owned business, by the way. And so they were also able to, it was not a buffet line by any means, but they had to work hard to secure that municipal grant along with the PPP funding and look at other opportunities. So great point. Thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. And speaking of leveraging tech for, just support of entrepreneurship, Ken, I'm going to throw this one back to you to kick us off. How can we leverage technology to create increased capital markets and investment for our small businesses and our startups? And I'll also ask you to speak a little bit to cryptocurrency, because I know we brought that up on our planning, and I think it's a really important space to talk about that here as well.
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Amber. Second to regulations being the enabling aspect to make our industry exist, technology is the second component. Without it, we can't be here. And what do I mean by that? If our belief and the conviction is that down the road, almost everyone, even students, would look at putting their dollar in things that matters to them and have that skin in the game. You need a technical framework that bring people together, that makes the process simple for a business owner. If you're running a food truck in Manhattan or in the Bronx, it got to be so simple that you go on a platform and you can deal with 10,000 of your investors, each of whom put in $20, and in a way that is cost efficient, but also when you need to send out an announcement, an update, that is just a click of a button. So all of that became possible just in the past 5 years or so. And I think the technology component enabled us to build a community of over 1 million across America. And out of that, the result, it wasn't a quota. More than 50% of companies and small businesses raising on Republic have an underserved founder. And including from Alaska to Alabama, it's not just Silicon Valley and New York, of all different range. So I think that when you have a diverse community by virtue of everyone participating, it gives rise to an equal playing field for business owners everywhere. Blockchain technology and the recent adoption, and it's in the news everywhere. There's so many different use cases, but I think there's one very important element that this technology, I think, is so crucial to financial services, but also to entrepreneurship, in that it enables people anywhere and everywhere to participate much more efficiently, much more cheaply. So I'll give you an example. My aunt in my family immigrated from Vietnam. So my distant relatives are all, all over Asia. If my aunt in, say, Hanoi or Singapore wants to invest $100 in a female-owned business in New York on Republic, the processing fee, the bank fee, is $30 up to $60. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to invest only $100. If she were to invest just $10 using Bitcoin, the processing fee is less than 50 cents. So all of a sudden, you now open it up for so many more people. So the potential down the road, I genuinely believe that not only in the US, but globally, you're gonna see micro investments done by everyone of all income and background spectrum. And I think that's going to be so good for a prosperous, robust entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Fantastic. Carlos, what are your thoughts on this? How can we leverage tech for increasing capital markets?
No, it's interesting because I don't know nearly as much as Ken does about cryptocurrency, but I do know that there are LGBT cryptocurrencies out there now, the LGBT token, and there's others that emerge. And the argument for these cryptocurrencies is, very similar to what Ken just talked about, equal access to markets, and the fact that discrimination in the cryptocurrency market is it's not happening the same way that it could in some repressive places where people are working. So there is this kind of vibe going on that this cryptocurrency could be a great equalizer, and that for discriminated groups and minority groups, it could allow them to have an equal footing. One of the issues that comes up a lot is kind of, when you talk about investing and entrepreneurship, is discrimination against minority groups and communities like the LGBT community. There's a survey from startup.org, which is a LGBT entrepreneurship kind of group, that talks about that almost 40% of people who are looking for capital investors do not come out to investors when they're looking for money. And a lot of that is driven by fear of discrimination based on LGBT. I can tell you anecdotally, not from a entrepreneurship perspective, but when I graduated law school, the conversation amongst the people in my LGBT group was, do you include your LGBTQ plus activities on your resume? Because are you exposing yourself to being discriminated against out of your resume? I ended up including them because I wanted to work in a place that is inclusive. But the question is there, and the question was there for me in terms of like, what am I giving up opportunity-wise by outing myself in my resume? And I think for minority communities and for LGBT communities specifically, one of the advantages of entrepreneurship is that you're able to kind of set your own path, but you're still dealing with the same barriers of discrimination and potential kind of being kind of, redlined into a different kind of area because of who you are, because of your background. So those are big issues that are somewhat alleviated by entrepreneurship, but are still present, that have to be overcome from the communities.
Great, thank you. That's so powerful. And Mark, I might ask if you have anything to weigh in on the Ken and Carlos's response, and then Rhoda, I'm going to throw it over to you for a kind of an education-focused question. So, Mark, any thoughts there?
Thank you for your reflections. I mean, you're coming from your points of view that are very distinct and that we need to listen to. So when it comes to Ken and the innovative aspects, and when it comes to the LGBT lens, Carlos, thank you for offering that. When I take a look at lack of access to capital, it's really the driving force. So listening to this portfolio of options is very exciting and energizing. After all, it is National Entrepreneurship Week, right? So in order to start and grow and scale a business, you need money. That's the bottom line. Capital is money. And how do we gain access to that? Well, under President Biden, American Rescue Plan, and through our Community Navigator concept that I mentioned earlier, it's important that we think about overall, there's a lack of established relationships with capital providers. And so I've been delighted and energized by the investment in CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, in terms of their role, minority depository institutions, MDIs, in terms of understanding and having a relationship with, I don't want to call it an unbankable audience, but maybe it's just not the right time to be underwritten and approved for that line of credit or bank loan. This, in addition to the other offerings here, the other great ideas, I think positions one, just like you should have a portfolio of options to consider when you're investing, you should also have a portfolio of options to consider when you're trying to access and manage and one day own that capital. So I think here we go, everyone listening here. By the way, thank you for your engagement on the chats. We can't wait to answer some Q&A specifically to you. But these are all options to put out on the table. And hopefully you have 2 or 3 takeaways when it comes to options for you that could work in accessing this capital that is critically important for growth and scale and to endure something like COVID in the future.
Amber, I just want to weigh in on this conversation. And actually, I know that you were going to go ahead and throw it over to Rhoda for a second, but there's actually also another piece that I think we have to be mindful and cognizant of, and that is, you know, some of the cultural, contextual aspects that we need to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at. Mark, you said this before, and part of that is understanding that, you know, various communities may not have experience and exposure, and that requires different types of education when we talk about entrepreneurship and instilling that mindset. And so, you know, in fact, there was a study that came out on CNBC that said, depending on which zip code you're born in, will have a big impact on whether or not you become an inventor or an innovator. And so I think we also have to be mindful, and this is really where it ties into education, to the extent that we can democratize entrepreneurship education, we're able to go ahead and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, because they then begin to understand the foundational tools that are required that maybe are part and parcel of some of the experience of other people in those zip codes. So I just want to add that, because this is a piece of component. It's meeting people where they're at from an educational perspective, especially when they're younger, in order to be able to present not just the educational background, but also representation of the types of entrepreneurs that they may want to be.
Yeah, it's powerful. And I'm glad you mentioned that study. They're often referred to as the lost Einsteins, the students that just didn't have access to entrepreneurship education or invention education or the like. And so I think that's a great segue, Rhoda, to the role of education and how tech can kind of be an equalizer and providing those experiences for students. And I'd also love you to weigh in on, you know, the whole movement of cryptocurrency and these access to capital conversations were things I did not have as a student. And so I'd love to hear your perspective from both perspectives of how can tech be used for education and what do we need to be teaching that we're not?
Okay.
I know it's a lot.
Thanks, Amber. I'll start with the cryptocurrencies piece, because one of the things that I find fascinating about that is the structure of that is so much more like bartering, which is something that in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, bartering is how we get things done when we're starting out early. And there are no transaction fees with bartering whatsoever. And so Bitcoin and other alternative currencies like that give us the opportunity to leverage our goods and services with each other in a way that doesn't have a lot of the friction that comes with traditional currencies and banking procedures. So that's that part. Next, I will go to Joe's comment, because I love what you brought up about losing the zip code lottery, is how my friends and I refer to it in our circles. You know, I grew up in Southwest Arkansas and in a town of 4,000, and I lived 10 miles outside of a 10-minute drive outside of that town of 4,000. So, you know, I'm a 4-H'er, cows, like all those things. But my mom is also an immigrant. And living in Jamaica as a child and watching people walk to a pipe to get water, watching children my age walk to a pipe to get water, and then bring it home to cook, to clean, to drink. Everything had to be done in this way. And when we needed toys, we made them. And so there was a resourcefulness that I was exposed to as a child living there that I don't think always happens in less privileged areas in this country. And technology has this great way for us to expose children to people who are doing a lot with so much less. Because it is important for people to dream and for them to see the possibilities, but to go into a place like Prescott, Arkansas, where I'm from, and give them a Mark Zuckerberg story, it's not gonna translate. Even I, as an African-American woman or as a Black woman going into a space to talk to inner city youth, it doesn't translate. I'm not from the inner city. Both of my parents are educators. I didn't know Black people couldn't read until I went to an integrated school. Before that, everybody around me read. And so everyone owned land. And so there was a completely different framework. And we have to be ready to give students the cultural currency and cultural repertoires that they need to be able to move between the spaces. And it's so important not only to acknowledge where people are, but to tell them that where they are is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. And we're not asking you to divorce yourself of your culture. We're asking for you to become fluid in your capacity to move through cultures so that you can take advantage of every opportunity that's around you when it presents itself. It's about being flexible, kind of like a triathlete or an Ironman, more so than, you know, I'm just a runner. Like, no, let's get you in let's cross-train you across some things. Let's make you cross-functional. And to start doing that in the classroom, and entrepreneurial mindset, it's so needed because that's the best defense for uncertainty. And like at Firia Labs, one of our things is to demystify technology and to tell students there's no magic here. You can learn how to program. For us, it's programming in Python. You can learn how to tell that little piece of technology that tells the Jumbotron what to flash at a football game. You can write the code to do that. And if you get good at this, you could have a job just like this right here in this podunk town if you have the infrastructure. And you can be a creator and not just a consumer of technology. Part of the digital divide, we like to think that because it's a machine that there's no bias. And at the end of the day, the bias comes in through the creator. And if you're not challenging your own biases, you code your biases into your work. So CS for good, CS for social justice, all of these things need entrepreneurial mindset, because entrepreneurial mindset begins with empathy and putting yourself over there where someone else is, and then building from there.
Phew, I'm getting goosebumps. I just want to say, like, this is the most, I think, optimistic panel to wrap up National Entrepreneurship Week that we could have had, because I'm just feeling really hopeful. And I'm going to just leave it open to the other panelists on the idea of education and it kind of expanding that to all levels. Like, who wants to weigh in? I know you all were nodding the whole. Okay, yeah. Ken, I saw your hand for everyone. Ken, go first.
It was amazing, Rhoda. And if I may add on to that, your narrative about making sure that everyone of all zip code know that they can be an engineer, they can be a teacher about everything. I think that when it comes to financial inequality, financial access, it is also a problem of lacking of information and believing that you cannot, that you gotta be, to own land, to own real estate is so out of reach. And therefore, as a high school student and then as a college student, you don't gain or acquire that financial knowledge and discipline. So how do we, even through state and federal and nonprofit, even providing students in high schools that are lacking in access, some grants so that, hey, here's $2. Why don't you invest in select real estate properties? Or why don't you look at a range of investment opportunities and pretend to be like the sharks on Shark Tank and just gain that familiarity and knowing that, yes, you can. Maybe today's $1 and hopefully down the road in 10 years is $1,000, but just knowing that you can be, that you can see first and then you can be what you can see, I think is at the end of the day, education is the only way to really change society and make things more equitable. And it's no different in the financial space when it comes to financial inclusion.
And I love that idea of having the investment come from the students too. We do a lot of pitch competitions and startup competitions. And the idea is always on the students that are pitching, but we could equally just very easily add the investment on that. That's a very unique, I'm going to write a note about that.
When Apple and Hewlett Packard donate laptops and phones to students, to high school students, they should do that as well. But I think Schwab and Fidelity should donate a small grant for accounting, for financial sophistication classes so that students can have a little bit of skin in the game and be very real in this exercise. Certainly as we grow at Republic, that's something that we hope to be able to do on our end at one point as well.
That's fantastic. And Carlos and Mark, I know I do want to give you all a chance to weigh in on this question because we've got some heads moving. So Carlos, why don't you kick us off with your thoughts?
So yeah, I would, first of all, +1 to everything that can, and Dr. Deon said, it's amazing. One of the things that we noticed as LGBT technology group is definitely kind of the power of mentorship. And we developed a program that we're launching called PADS, which is Powerful Action Through the Help of Storytelling. And we're doing interviews with members of the STEM community, engineers, people who work in STEM, who are LGBTQ+ and out, immigrants, transgender. And we're going to be posting these interviews one a month and expand the program around kind of, here are people in STEM who started from a place you started from, who are LGBT, who are transgender. And here's their stories of how they became one of the top engineers at Apple or how they became at the top levels of AT&T. So the power of storytelling and the power of mentorship and the ability to see someone that started where you came from is super powerful. This is a very personal thing for me. I was an illegal immigrant who came over when I was 10 or 11. I did not have any opportunity. I did not grow up around people who had all of this. And I happened to plug into a network that allowed me to thrive. But I know that, but for the grace of God, it could have gone very differently in any of these steps. And I could have ended up in a different place, but for the right influences and somebody believing enough in me to say, you can do this, even though you started from, even though you don't look like the people that are doing this now. So the power of mentorship, our PAVS program and programs like that are crucial so that people can believe that they can do this. Because I think a lot of times people lack a belief that looking around their own communities now, they don't see people who've done it and they need to see those role models. So it's really important, the work that everyone on this panel is doing towards education.
And I think that you all as panelists are representative of that too. Just the diversity of perspective on this panelist is powerful. And I would encourage, if there are educators listening, to show this panel to your students. But Mark, I definitely want to give you ample time because I know you're just kind of taking this all in and probably have a lot to weigh in on here.
Well, the bottom line is education is everything. I mean, I'm a product of education. I know everyone around here is too. I mean, I never would have thought that somebody from a one-stop-like community without access to an academic household could be in this position today, serving the country nationally. What a great opportunity. But I'll keep it real. I mean, let's all think about those small business owners. I heard of two yesterday that texted me. I think, Mark, I'm going to shut down today. I can't go on. And so that just broke my heart. I mean, it broke my heart. And let's think about the Paycheck Protection Program. Maybe those that that leveraged it this time around in 2021, but that didn't in 2020. That was a lack of education and access. And so I'd like to applaud everybody who's been itemizing some SBA resources. So there's resources out there. The deal is that we have to make sure that they're accessible, and these awareness campaigns, we need to connect to the audience. And what I've seen from the ground is that kind of thank you, Rhoda, for that triathlete example, because you need three major situations right now. You need legal support, You need a established relationship with a capital provider, and you need finance and accounting. And those don't have to be FTEs, even part-time. They could be outsourced through our technical assistance road mapping across the country with the SBDCs. Mentorship, I'm glad that was brought up because we have SCORE chapters across the US. You can get there, but by being proactive. But we've also got to do our part to meet you, as you stated, to meet you there where you are, right? And so the way I look at this is, if you view it with the PPP program as an example, and we could use many more, just think of the person that had the first draw, the second draw, if qualified, meaning a 25% reduction in quarter over quarter analysis from 2020 to 2019 comparison, and think about what's coming under the Biden-Harris administration, and think about all these other options. So we've got to both work together in terms of having that proactive entrepreneurial spirit, right? And us as the education and resource provider meeting the entrepreneur halfway. I think this is going to be a wonderful moment in our American history, and it couldn't come soon enough.
Great, thank you. And if you all missed our Federal Entrepreneurship Day panels on Wednesday, they covered education and workforce development, access to capital, and COVID economic recovery. So there are a ton of great resources, and that recording will be up soon as well. But, we've talked a lot about tech-focused companies and the presence of techs, and I just love for some weighing in on non-tech businesses. We've hinted at it a little bit, and the importance of those organizations. And Ken, I'm going to start with you. And what is the importance of non-tech? And I know your work also invests in non-tech heavily too. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
And we started out focusing almost predominantly on tech businesses, but over time, and particularly during 2020 when the pandemic hit a year ago, it became very clear that the need for capital was even more so amplified within the non-tech sector. And so we also own and operate a company called Next Seed based out of Houston. And the model there is not the binary of like venture capital investing that, you invest $100 and you aim to get $10,000 back. No, the model there is a revenue sharing so that it makes it feasible for restaurant, hair salon, anyone, basically any business model can raise from the retail public because investor can meaningfully expect something back, right? Very few companies can expect the 100x return of a tech company profile, but any credible business will generate revenue, and sharing in that revenue is a very compelling investment model. So we have been increasingly focusing on making sure that small businesses, and the reality is, even though the tech businesses get the headline news, it is the non-tech businesses, the brick and mortar businesses, that is the bedrock, the foundation of our economy in terms of hiring people and creating jobs. And so it's definitely overlooked when it comes to private equity and venture capital, excluded at all. But for us, when we look at retail investing as a capital source, non-tech small businesses has become a core focus for us, and I think for the industry overall.
Great, thank you. Carlos, will you weigh in on non-tech businesses and kind of what their needs are in this unique space?
Sure. I think one of the things that struck me is that nonprofit organizations are also entrepreneurship. Like, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur, but I guess I am. I ran a nonprofit organization with Chris Wood that Joe helped co-found, and we started up from scratch. There was a napkin kind of thing on the back of a napkin. A lot of the organizations that we work with, a lot of the centers that we work with around the country who provide services to LGBT underprivileged youth, are people who saw a need in their community and said, hey, there's no one that's helping this youth right now. I'm going to do this. And they got a one-room shelf, one-room place somewhere, and we provide them with the technology, and they open the doors and help the kids in their community. And those people who are running these nonprofit businesses are just as much entrepreneurs as anyone else. And I don't know that people who are in the nonprofit space really think of themselves or ourselves as entrepreneurs, because until this conversation, to be honest with you, I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur, but now I'm like, wait, I am an entrepreneur because I'm running a business, and all of these things that are happening are entrepreneurship. So I think that for me, like the nonprofit organizations and the nonprofit world is another space that's non-tech that really is a, you know, an opportunity for entrepreneurship education and to kind of, you know, let us know how, what tools are available for our type of work as well, not just people who are looking for venture capital.
Absolutely. I think that's very important to uplift the nonprofit kind of arm of this potential entrepreneurship development. And Rhoda, I'd love for you to weigh in on, I know Firia Labs does a lot in coding and robotics and STEM. So you're used to being in the tech side, but what is the importance of also sharing the idea of non-tech businesses with the youth today as well?
Thanks, Amber. let me for a second, because I think it's important for students to know that entrepreneurship extends beyond technology, that is only one avenue for solving problems in a community. And so having a conversation that says, let's just solve a problem. What do the people need? What problem do we need to solve? What resources do we have to solve that? The capacity to look at our resources is not just a skill for the entrepreneur or the person who wants to start a business. That ability to look at resources is just a good life skill to have. And things like nonprofits help people connect with resources. Other businesses everything is about resource transaction. And so it's important for us to emphasize all of them, not just tech, because they all come together to lift us up as a community.
Joe, you're on mute if you're talking. I saw your hand go, but you're on mute.
I just want to weigh in on this issue, having worked at and been a professor at a community college. And also, I think this month is also a career and technical education month as well. I think it's important to point out, and Ken kind of alluded to this, that, you know, there are a lot of spaces and places for jobs here, you know, plumbers, HVAC repair, mechanics, linesmen. I was down in Kentucky in coal-affected country at Hazard Community and Technical College, and they have a great linesman program. They cannot fill that program fast enough. And so I think this idea, this concept of entrepreneurship, one of the things we have to do is demystify this idea that it's somebody behind a computer, but rather somebody who's working on their own and going out there and establishing a business. And that business model may already exist. It may be people who've already gone ahead and are looking at, particularly in rural communities, you know, the next generation where you're going to hand a business off to, you know, a younger person in the family. And so I think that we have to, as we talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, we also have to talk about that within the context of the array of jobs that are out there and the need for various types of practices. And it's frustrating for me, although I've been in tech entrepreneurship, that we oftentimes limit this idea that the only successful entrepreneurs, in fact, Carlos is really a good example of that, saying, you know what, I didn't see myself as an entrepreneur. Well, I can tell you there is nothing that has been more impactful than the recent pandemic to make us all realize that we had to be entrepreneurial in some form or fashion. Everybody had to pivot. Everybody had to go ahead and change the way that they were doing things. And so I think we have to, and part of this is the education piece, and part of this is how things are portrayed in the media, that we have to revisit the conversation. And let's go ahead and uplift the people in the communities, the welders, the plumbers, the people who own, you know, businesses that really also contribute to the well-being of the community and help them run better, faster. Listen, the power is out, nothing else is going to matter. You can go look at what's going on in Texas, right? Like if the power is out, we're not having these conversations. So I just want to go ahead when we talk about sort of non-digital jobs, right? Analog jobs, they are just as important. And it's just as important for us to go ahead and communicate the value and the pride of those types of jobs and those types of entrepreneurial opportunities in kids and students and adults. Because when we go ahead and things happen, and I saw this in coal-affected communities in Appalachia, where the majority of my work has been, and when you begin to rely on a mono economy with just one employer, and then things change, we're out in a situation where we end up having to go ahead and really focus on retraining. Well, the pandemic has taught us that we have to have that as part and parcel of our education process, critical thinking and the ability to be able to pivot. So I just wanted to go ahead and stand on that soapbox for just a second, not least of which because this is Career and Technical Education Month, and because of my background and experience working with hundreds of community colleges across the country, we have to go ahead and uplift the non-sexy entrepreneurs just as much as we do the ones that are going to scale unicorn businesses. So I'll step back now, but this is near and dear to my heart, as you could probably tell.
Absolutely.
That was amazing. Every small business matters to this economy. And I haven't met anyone that doesn't like to feel valued. That's the bottom line. Everyone matters. Let's put this to a real example. An entrepreneur that I know very well now started his business with $300, janitorial business. So it started off cleaning houses, then cleaning offices. Today, that's a $20 million business because that person said, you know what, even though I'm non-tech, I can empower my business with tech. So adding merchant services, back then it was Square for him, and introducing an app to manage his workforce and to understand where the needs were. And we're talking with stadiums and school districts, et cetera, et cetera. And now that person just helped erect a technological center. And so that's how you wrap all this around. They couldn't have been there without this person that started his janitorial business with $300. Now look at him now. And
Mark, you know what? I want to add to that because, you just reminded me of an example of an electrician that I worked with. And he came over and I sat down with him and we went through how is he billing and how is he presenting himself, right? And when he goes ahead and puts together a proposal, what does that look like, right? And I said to him, look, if we go ahead and use just a little bit of technology here and you email a proposal, you're going to make more money for doing the same amount of work in the same amount of time. And this is in a rural community. So I think that uplifting the folks who are going into these various careers to really view themselves, and when that's really what it is, this sense of agency, this sense of representation that I am an entrepreneur, even though historically people may not necessarily look like, how do we go ahead and really change that mindset so that when we start talking to people, because that has made a significant difference. And I think what you just said is absolutely right. The ability to be able to apply technologies in services and lines of business that haven't existed before and to make those businesses more profitable is just one aspect of that, but also helping those people who do this type of thing say, you know what, you are an entrepreneur. And look at the amazing things that you've done in building your own business and the opportunities to be able to go ahead and help other people. So Mark, I couldn't agree with you more. I really appreciate that comment.
The only thing I'll add to that is that I do feel like I'm challenging a little bit. I don't know that I've seen that come out of the entrepreneurship world. I don't know that I've seen an ad with an electrician that has, I am an entrepreneur above his head. I do feel like people do not see themselves as entrepreneurs, even though they are, because entrepreneurship has a very narrow definition up till now. And I don't know that entrepreneurship has gone out of its way to expand that definition in a way that's visual to the communities that we're talking about.
And Carlos, I mean, it made me think of last night on our virtual reality meetup, we had somebody join us from Orlando. He had, he was experiencing some changes in his life and really wanted to take ownership of his own trajectory. But when he heard the word entrepreneurship, he conceived that he had to come up with the next big idea. He didn't associate that with, I can just have my own job, my own business. So yeah, Rhoda, please weigh in.
Yeah, I can't resist. I've got to echo Carlos's comment about narratives and how important it is that we give people diverse stories and diverse narratives about what's possible, especially in the classroom and when we're talking to people and teaching our youth to say anything that you love to do, there is a set of human beings who hate to do that and would gladly pay you to do that. And everything that you hate doing, there is someone on this planet who loves doing that and would gladly allow you to do some kind of exchange with them in order for you to provide that service. And so like having that narrative where it's like, I'm good at this, I love doing this. I found people who need me in just the way I occur in the world. And now I can be of service and be a contribution. Like vocation is just as much a part of this as just a business. Like this is about serving our communities, and it's about lifting each other up as a people and as a planet and as human beings.
And I think that storytelling is important for like the people that are hearing those stories being told. So I'll give you an example. My dad growing up owned his own business. He was a carpenter. And when we would be in school and they would ask what your parents do, I'd be like, my dad's just a carpenter. And the word just there is just not, it's a disservice to the work that he did as an entrepreneur. And it wasn't until I got into an entrepreneurial education space in my professional career myself that I was like, oh my goodness, like my dad really took a lot of responsibility for our family and took a huge risk to be an entrepreneur. And so, Carlos, I 100% agree. I don't think that they display themselves as entrepreneurs. And so it's really our job to advocate for that. So I am, oh yeah.
One more interjection, and that is teachers are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
When we encourage teachers to teach entrepreneurial mindset, that first knee-jerk reaction is, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't teach that. I'm like, did you ask somebody for money for your kids last week? I bet you did. Did you figure out how to provide something to your students when they told you there was no funding? I bet you did. And I watched my dad as a teacher go into a business in the community and say, hey, my art kids need this. Would you be willing to support? Like, I watched him raise capital, and I never thought of that as an entrepreneurial activity until, like you, I got into the entrepreneurial ecosystem space and started hearing people talking that way. And I'm like, oh, I've been around entrepreneurial mindset my entire life. I just didn't know that. And we all have that in us, because being entrepreneurial is to be human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are designed to solve problems.
And this is where I think, Ken, you come in, and the work that you do is so important, because, you know, a lot of more traditional avenues for financing and obtaining capital really look at business plans that, you know, but if you're working as a farmer or a grower and you just need, let's say, a new tractor or some other new piece of equipment that, you know, that's what you need, but you don't necessarily have the friends and family who are going to, because that's usually the first place that a lot of folks who maybe necessarily are not able to tap into other markets. The services that you're providing to people who maybe, you know, they want to be able to rent a chair at a, you know, hairdresser shop. I certainly know that from experience in my own circumstances. But it's such an important way to be able to get capital to those people who oftentimes are running successful businesses, but don't necessarily have the books or the ability to be able to, they haven't had that, they inherited a business, or they started from scratch because they needed to survive and provide for their family. I'm just curious, like, you know, in terms of your experience with, you know, the work that you do, how important is this?
You know, I've just been soaking it in and agreeing with everything that all of you have said with such passion. And yeah, it's just been incredible. You know, on our end, and the narrative for us has always been that we got to look at entrepreneurship in itself a more inclusive lens, that you don't have to even be an entrepreneur to be part of entrepreneurship. And this is my example here, that a customer, an advisor, certainly an investor, that's what makes entrepreneurship successful. And you see doctors and lawyers and scientists and professors, once after their graduate degree, they become a professional, they invest in the public market, but then they never have any, you know, most people don't have any relevancy in incubating innovation. Imagine that if you're a young doctor in medical school, and somehow that you look at entrepreneurship that, hey, I'm not gonna found a biotech company, but maybe I'm an advisor or invest a little bit of money. She then can become a surgeon at Harvard Medical School, but there's a piece of it that contributing knowledge to innovation, to this startup and multiple startups in the time to come. So I think our work and our conviction is, how do you make everyone of all paths of life and decisions that it is entrepreneurship that's going to drive global society, and that everyone has a say and a role, and whether it's contributing expertise or their voice or their dollar, all of these things contribute into this, you know, concept of entrepreneurship that I think will increasingly become the dominant driving force of both private and public, you know, direction and influence.
Yeah, the ecosystem matters tremendously. I mean, the ecosystem is everything. So I'm going to ask my final question. And going to have each of you maybe just speak to one takeaway for anybody listening to this conversation. What is one takeaway that you hope they would leave with? And then I'll allow, if there are any questions that come in, I think there's been a lot of kind of just absorbing this conversation for everyone that's involved, but think about what's one takeaway you would want a listener or somebody watching on the back end, the recording to take from this conversation. And I will start with Carlos.
Thank you. I think the takeaway for me, so I'm going to make this a takeaway for everyone else, is that there needs to be an expansion of what an entrepreneur is and the definition of an entrepreneurship. If I see an email come through saying, here are the resources to help you become a better doctor, I'm going to ignore that email because I'm not a doctor. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are being missed with that language because they don't see themselves as entrepreneurs. So if you're sending out information and you're sending out resources to entrepreneurs and the communities that you're trying to reach do not see themselves that way, there's a huge disconnect there. So I think the definition of entrepreneurship needs to be expanded so that people who don't see themselves as entrepreneurs currently understand that this is resources that they can take advantage of as well.
Thank you. Ken, I'll let you go next.
You have one for business operators and one for everyone else. And I think for business operators, myself being one, the takeaway is that there is no failure. You're going to get a lot of no from people that you approach for capital. And that's okay. Every single no is a takeaway and insight. But there are resources out there, and what you do matters. Doesn't matter what your business is. So, just keep grinding and take every no as a learning experience. And I think for everyone else, it's like your dollar matters. If you value a vote that took so many people so long to give everyone the right to vote, you can vote at the ballot, but also voting with your money. So be intentional on how you spend on the ability to put your dollar at work, whether it's investing or buying a product or philanthropic. So that's the takeaway on my end.
I love that. Thank you. Rhoda, I'm going to have you go next.
Okay. So I would say that there is no downside to teaching entrepreneurial mindset. That would be my message, because resourcefulness, being solution oriented, and being empathetic to the needs of others are valuable skills and tools to have, regardless of where you find yourself, whether you're working for yourself or working for someone else. Those benefit everyone.
Thank you. And Mark, I want you to take it home for us, kind of representing communities across the country. So I purposely put you last, I apologize, but I'm just really interested to hear.
Those are great takeaways. My biggest takeaway is be an elephant and not a hippo. You know what I'm talking about? Elephants have big ears, hippos have small ears. It's to listen. And it's to meet the entrepreneur, the small business owners, where they are, whether they're in rural America, whether they're in a dense area, whether it's a place where there's a high population of Black-owned businesses. By the way, happy Black History Month. And whether it's Latinx businesses or Hispanic or Native American, Asian American, a group of disabled, owned businesses, women-owned businesses, white-owned businesses. Who did I miss? Everybody's important. Veteran-owned businesses, LGBT, Asian American businesses, there's geographic scenarios in there. There's areas where, climate change comes into play. There's areas like Texas where some people are getting a triple threat. They're in COVID. They're also trying to figure out all this disaster recovery resources. And then you get the situation with the power and the water. So let's meet our entrepreneurs where they are. There's resources. You see some of them here, but they're not connecting. And at the end of the day, that's our job. That's my big takeaway, along with the takeaways from the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. And Joe, I just want to thank you for bringing together these panelists. I think this has been an illuminating conversation. It's just been really hopeful and optimistic for the future. And so I'd love to hear your final thoughts, and then we'll put up the dates for next year, if that works.
Super inspired by each of the conversations that we've had today. This has been near and dear to working in and around entrepreneurship advocacy for the last 7 years in communities that run the gamut from coal mining affected communities, African-American communities, transgender communities. I've had the opportunity to really understand and continue to learn about both the challenges and the opportunities. And, I think as we look towards the future, there is no the skill set of tomorrow is going to be the entrepreneurial skill set, the ability to go ahead and transition to a different type of career, pivot to new opportunities and identify those opportunities. And so when we restarted National Entrepreneurship Week, it was really with this type of activity that we had in mind. How do we go ahead and democratize the conversation? How do we make it as accessible as possible? How can we open those doors and take the work that's already being done? When I started looking across the federal government as part of the work that I was doing at the Department of Commerce and the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, I realized there were so many wonderful resources. The SBA is a great place to start a business, but then if you want to sell stuff, you can sell stuff into NASA, you can sell into the military, NIH, all of the wonderful panelists that we've had. And it's a great way to go ahead and start a business. So for me, this is just the beginning. It's the genesis of what I believe that National Entrepreneurship Week can do, and the ability to be able to bring together disparate communities and have conversations. The final thing I'll say about this is that for quite some time right now, our country and people have been feeling like we're on separate sides of an issue. And the one thing that makes me the most, brings me the most joy is that almost across the board, when you look at any of the polling that's done around entrepreneurship, it is a bipartisan, people agree that entrepreneurship is an American activity. And it's something that almost everybody agrees on. In fact, earlier this week, there was a bipartisan Senate resolution from Senators Klobuchar and Senator Scott, one Republican, one Democrat, in support of National Entrepreneurship Week and a number of national initiatives. How exciting is that we can come together? My hope is that we can go ahead and have entrepreneurship serve as a foundation for us meeting, because when we start working together, we start caring a little bit more about each other. We start worrying a little bit more about other people's business because it's going to go ahead and affect my business. So, and in some small part, I'm hopeful that this will help us bring people together just a little bit more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And I think we'll leave that on that note to encourage folks to join us again next year. This has just been the most rewarding way to end National Entrepreneurship Week 2021. We encourage you to save the date for 2022. And as Joe will mention, it falls on Valentine's Day. We don't love anything more than we love entrepreneurship. So we would encourage you all to join us for conversations, for programs, and participate in as many ways as you are able in 2022. Yeah, Rhoda?
A question. There's from Mike Fritz that says, given the fact that online systems tend to make e-ship training more vanilla, how do we see an individualized help for diverse groups via these online systems?
Thank you, Mike. Anybody want to take that one on first?
I'm happy to. I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And I think it's a combination of skill sets, right? We have some core skill sets that you're going to need to have, marketing and finance, and all of those are going to be sort of vanilla, regardless of whatever type of business that you have. But then there's other things. And I think that this is where the opportunity for education, but also the opportunity for us as resource providers, have the opportunity to be able to go ahead and say, why is this relevant to me? And for there to be new content that goes ahead and speaks to the next generation of entrepreneurs and even people who've been displaced, to be able to say, okay, I always think about it like this, right? There was a kid in your class who probably started a business. Maybe he wasn't the smartest guy, a little bit of a class clown, didn't really know what he was doing. And then all of a sudden you look around and the guy's owning a business and you're like, man, if that guy can do it, how can I not do? He wasn't so smart and he wasn't that good of a kid. He was a class clown. How did you create a little bit of competition there, right? So I think, Mike, to your question and the response to that is that there is an obligation for us to go ahead and create that representation so that people can have a sense of agency and take ownership of the fact that here's an opportunity, but we have to go ahead and meet people where they're at. We really have to make it so that it's as accessible as possible to the communities at where they're at, and not go ahead and presume some sort of one size fits all that's going to go ahead and be appropriate. And I think that's what Mike is referring to.
And I'll say one more thing, and this applies to all systems. Diversity in creation of systems is crucial for diversity within the execution of systems. So if you want more inclusive systems, if you want more inclusive programming, you need to have more diverse programming people and more people at the front end of the system that can guide that kind of development rather than try to fix it after you've created the system.
Mark, I'll ask you to weigh in. There were a lot of resources shared on this.
Oh my gosh, we got to do a better job of marketing as well. I mean, what is the exact persona from a small business owner that this the curriculum is trying to address, right? And then also there's opportunities for a customized experience with mentorship. You know, if some of these are broadscape curriculums or programs, having a mentor say, how can we make this specific? And also to your point, there are excellent programs that are driving toward a particular a segment or demo of the small business community. We need to lift them up as bright spots and share best practices. So those are a couple reflections.
Sure. And you mentioned previously the need for segmentation. And I think that's, I mean, having those different audiences represented in different systems being directly applicable to them is vital. So
absolutely. I'll say one more thing. Sorry. Yeah. Now, but we need to think of substantive training programs beyond a boot camp or a 5-hour Saturday. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So we got to make sure that the entrepreneurs right now, they're trying to, like you all, you know, you're managing independent school districts in your home. You're having all sorts of Zoom bombing going on. You're multitasking while you're tasking. All these things are happening. So we got to also make sure that we follow up. And when we provide a service, that there's not a reference to another website, but there's a checklist. This is what you need to do if you're in this situation. And so we need to be thinking more in that term so that we can engage the audience to come back for the next training so they could be repeat customers. We need to take a look at these small business owners like they're our customers, and how are we going to get them to come back for some more education? So a couple of thoughts for your consideration, all of us, for our wonderful customers out there, our small businesses across 50 states and Puerto Rico.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone that's been very complimentary in the chat. I encourage you to check out all the resources that were shared. Thank you, Jack, for getting all of our panelists' links out there. You've done an incredible job of sharing a lot of resources in that chat function. And I'm just very thankful for you all. And I'm glad to have spent my Friday afternoon with you and learning from you. And this has just been fantastic. So, thank you all.
Everybody.
So much,
Take care. Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend.